Episode 8, Zanesville Animal Massacre. Hey y'all, I'm Heather, and this is Poisoned Appalachia, the dark side of Appalachia. As always, thank you for listening. And I'm on a new microphone, yay! Maybe now I won't sound like I'm in a tin can. When I first started the podcast, I didn't know if anybody would ever listen to it at all, so I just have been recording it from my iPhone, and it's not been doing bad, but I just really don't like the sound of the audio with it. So I'm glad that I could get this, and hopefully things will sound better. Thank you all for listening to me, even when I did sound like I was in a tin can. I appreciate it. You guys are all awesome. This episode, I've kind of gone back and forth on, do I want to do it or not? I'm a huge animal lover, and to read about all of these innocent animals killed, I just wasn't sure if I could face it. But then I started reading about a conspiracy theory about it, that maybe the guy that was accused didn't do it and was murdered. So I decided to do it. Let's look into the facts and the theories and see what happened or may have happened. And trigger warning, this is a rough one. If you're an animal lover, you may want to skip this one. It's bad. This all occurred in Zanesville, Ohio. Zanesville isn't all that far from Columbus, the state capital, so I was kind of surprised that it is included in the Appalachian region, but it is. So not a lot of Appalachian things occur in Ohio, but maybe that's a good thing if they're all like this one. This is bad enough for several of them. Zanesville is a city in the county of Muskingum County. It's actually the county seat of Muskingum County. It's located at the confluence of the Licking and Muskingum rivers. The city is approximately 52 miles east of Columbus and had a population of 24,765 as of the 2020 census. It was once the state capital of Ohio from 1810 to 1812. Zanesville was named after Ebenezer Zane, who had blazed Zane's Trace, if you've ever heard of that. It's a pioneer trail from Wheeling, West Virginia to Maysville, Kentucky, through present-day Ohio. In 1797, he remitted the land as payment to his son-in-law, John McIntyre. At the point where Zane's Trace met the Muskingum River, with the assistance of Zane, McIntyre platted the town and opened an inn in Ferry by 1799. I don't know why I keep saying 19. In 1801, Zanesville was officially renamed. It was formerly Westbourne, but now was the chosen name of Zanesville, named after Zane. From 1810 to 1812, the city was the second state capital of Ohio. The national road courses through Zanesville as U.S. Route 40. The city grew quickly in the 1820s through the 1850s. The city and the city of Putnam, which is on the eastern side of the Muskingum River, from the 1840s until the American Civil War broke out, was part of the Underground Railroad, which is pretty cool. In excess of 5,000 Union soldiers, along with hundreds of townsfolk, were stationed in the Zanesville area to protect the city in 1863 during Morgan's raid. And novelist Zane Grey was a descendant of the Zane family, and he was born in the city. After the Civil War, the city grew in size and gained prominence in the state for manufacturing and textiles. The city was also notoriously known for its bootlegging activities in the Prohibition era. From the 1820s until the 1970s, downtown Zanesville was the premier economic center of the city, with various factories, offices, small to large stores, many hotels, and over a dozen stages and movie theaters, nearly 20 churches, and nearby neighborhoods inhabited mainly by persons of Irish or German ethnicity. The city was historically known as the center for pottery manufacturing in the first half of the 20th century. More than a dozen potteries operated in the city and surrounding areas, bolstered by ample local clay deposits and rivers. The area produced both art pottery and functional utilitarian pottery. Notable pottery manufacturers operated in that area included the S.A. Weller Pottery Company, J.B. Owens Pottery Company, and the Roseville Pottery Company, and also American Encaustic Tiling Company and the Mosaic Tile Company. The city peaked economically in the 1950s, like many others, and then it experienced a post-industrial decline. The city today has a relatively high level of chronic poverty and unemployment, and a relatively low level of labor force participation and educational attainment. Since the 1970s, the downtown has been on the decline, with mainly banks, law offices, churches, and small shops. According to their website, though, Zanesville is the second most charming small town in the U.S. So if you want to go to Zanesville, be sure to check out the Y Bridge Zanesville's website says since the early 1800s, the Y Bridge has received worldwide attention. Ripley's Believe It or Not featured Zanesville's Y Bridge as the only bridge in the world which you could cross and still be on the same side of the river. The bridge grabbed attention of airline pilots as well. In the days when pilots relied on landmarks for their bearings, Amelia Earhart called Zanesville the most recognizable city in the country because of the Y Bridge. I've seen it myself years ago. It was pretty cool to see. I was a kid, so I probably wasn't overly excited, but it is pretty neat, really. There's the Wilds. It's a wildlife preserve ran by the Columbus Zoo where you can see rhinos, cheetahs, all kinds of different species of birds. The website says that you can tour an open-air safari, or those wanting to get a bit closer and personal with our animals can upgrade to a wild side tour. For guests looking to get an aerial perspective of pasture and our animals, check out the Zipline Safari Tour. Horseback riding is another great way to see the prairie and native species. Once again, it's one of those places I've always talked about going, but I've never made it there yet. But hopefully someday I will. And FYI, if you've ever gone to the Columbus Zoo, or never gone to the Columbus Zoo, you should definitely check it out. Of course, it's not in Zanesville, but the Wilds are owned by them, so it just made me think of it. And I think it's a pretty neat zoo. I really enjoy it. Also, Zanesville has a variety of art galleries and museums, local wineries and breweries, and lots of shopping. So now you know a little bit more about the area. Let's get down to the whole gruesome business. On October 18, 2011, Sam Kopchak, a retired school teacher and a neighbor of Terry Thompson, saw that his horses were acting anxious. He went out and Terry's horses were acting the same way. He looked and there was a male African lion watching him right next to his property. It didn't seem dangerous though, so he slowly walked back to his barn and called his mom and told her to call Terry to let him know. When she couldn't get Terry, she called the police. A lion loose anywhere would definitely be alarming, but it wasn't completely unexpected because Terry Thompson had a wildlife preserve on 73 acres of land, and occasionally his animals would escape. On Terry's preserve, he had Bengal tigers, African lions and lionesses, baboons, chimpanzees, a variety of monkeys, black bears, grizzly bears, wolves, and horses. So to see one lion loose, Sam Kopchak just thought maybe that it had somehow escaped one of Terry's containment areas. But who's Terry Thompson? Terry Thompson was born in 1949 and grew up in a farm outside of Zanesville. They lived close to an airport, and that's where he liked to spend a lot of his time. He'd ride his bicycle over, watch the airplanes, and wanted to fly, says Dr. Ralph Smith, a local vet who now lives on a lake where Terry used to go camping as a Boy Scout. Terry was a Boy Scout who had proudly become an Eagle Scout. He played football in high school. He was just an all-American kid. He loved flying and got his pilot's license before his driver's license. He was a likable kid and had a bunch of friends. Thompson's life sounds like an idyllic small-town America 60s childhood. Bicycles, Boy Scouts, loving parents, sporting triumphs, souped-up cars, and girls. All that changed, though, when Terry was drafted into Vietnam. He couldn't understand, says his friend Phil Kress, why he got taken away from his life here to be drafted to Vietnam. Terry's time in Vietnam was the defining experience in his life. Mike Marshall, who later flew civilian planes with him, says Terry brought it up frequently. He wanted the people to know that he was there. He was upset with the Army because he saw some horrible, ugly things, they said. Thompson was a door gunner on a Huey helicopter. He told Marshall that they had to soften up landing zones, drop soldiers off, and pick them up under hostile fire. They had to make emergency medical evacuations, drag both bodies of wounded and maimed soldiers onto the helicopter. He even said many of them died right there in his arms. On the worst days, there were more people to be rescued than they possibly could. They could only get so many on the helicopter, says Kress. And they actually had to pry their fingers off the helicopter so they could get off the ground. As for the enemy, he said he just had to keep mowing them down. It was so bad, one time he ran out of bullets. He never really got over it, says Marshall. He had no reason why he was spared, says Kress. Why him? Why all the guys that had a wife and children are now in Arlington, but he made it out? He wrestled with the biblical thing. I guess I'll never go to heaven because I kill people, his friend said. A farmer and scrap dealer, Fred Polk, who was one of Thompson's neighbors and sometimes tangled with him, also knew him before and after he went away to war. He always laughed and would be real pleasant before, says Polk. He smiled a lot, but when he came back, he had a funny look. You know what I mean? He was kind of a loner. He was a bit different from the other ones. I think he had a little touch of Agent Orange. I said that he never left Vietnam. I'm going to put it that way. He never left it. The time in Vietnam changed him according to everyone. But one big thing happened while Vietnam that kind of changed Terry's life. Terry cared for a monkey and loved it. When he was in Vietnam, he'd befriended the little monkey, and it planted the seed for caring for wild animals for the rest of his life. He took care of that monkey most of the time he was over there. It kept him sane while he was there. This in part helped to develop his love for exotic animals. After Vietnam, he met and married Mary Ann. She was a barrel racer, an accomplished horsewoman, and a local school teacher. She came from a well-to-do family, and they were together for 40 years and had a great relationship. Most of the time. Thompson owned a bike shop in town. He became the local Harley dealer and also got a license to sell guns. Already he did things differently from other people. Back in the 70s, says Stillwell, if you saw him with a toothbrush in his back pocket, you know he was going to a trip somewhere, because he would rarely take any clothes with him. For a while there was a plane on the roof shop, which I actually saw pictures of that. I'll have to try to share those on Instagram. I will not share pictures of the animals, though. I'll tell you that now, so you don't have to worry about that. Or at least the aftermath of the animals. Thompson did things his own way, and when it led him to trouble, he was the kind of person that had an issue with the authority, and he didn't really care. He once told about someone repeatedly breaking the windows of his shop and vandalizing a place, and how he'd waited for 3 nights to catch the culprit. On the 3rd night, this guy showed up, started beating the windows out, and Terry just really beat him up so bad. He kicked into the mode of what he was taught in Vietnam: beat people up, kill people. He said he didn't have any control over it. The guy was able to stumble to his feet and try to run, but Terry caught up to him. So at that moment, he took off to run. It was no longer self-defense. So the perpetrator tried to bring up charges, but they didn't stick. He eventually sold the Harley shop, though. Terry did. After selling the shop, he got a job flying for a local millionaire, including a vintage World War II era Stearman biplane. He started keeping some of his own planes on the Kopchak Road property. There are plenty of colorful stories about his exploits. He had gone under the interstate where it crosses the Muskingum River in the middle of Zanesville. He landed an ultralight on the county fairgrounds. Terry was an adrenaline junkie. He raced drag boats and is said to set a world record in his boat Master Blaster by going from 0 to 158 miles per hour on a quarter-mile course in an open cockpit. And there were always planes. Everything he had was fast, said Marshall. Fast motorcycles, fast boats, fast airplanes. He liked the speed. He and his wife liked to drive a decommissioned fireman's truck around town until one night he wrecked it. He was a hoarder. There were just said to be well over 100 cars and trucks and planes on his property, as well as motorcycles and just about everything else. In 1977, Terry went to an auction for exotic animals and bought his wife a baby lion cub called Simba for her birthday. This was the first of many exotic animal purchases. Just like everything else, Terry began filling his property with exotic animals. Mary Ann was all on board, being an animal lover too. Over the years, they kept accumulating animals. They even had camels at one point. He said his life was all about the animals he loved and nurtured. He proudly said he'd never sought to make a penny off their profit of their captivity. Without a USDA license, he wasn't allowed to supply animals for photo shoots or commercial events, though he sometimes got around it. He would often use fellow owner Cindy Huntsman's animals in accreditation. After his death, footage emerged showing Thompson handling one of his lion cubs to Heidi Klum on a fashion shoot. And in 2008, he appeared on The Rachel Ray Show as an animal handler. His friends referred to other such outings, a shoot with Newt Gingrich, for instance, and say he took animals on 2 different occasions to a Bloomberg corporate summer picnic in New York. Thompson also used to insist that he never sold exotic animals, but many in the animal world say that that wasn't true and that he was selling his animals at auctions. In 2005, Terry was charged with animal cruelty relating to some livestock that he kept on his parents' property on the other side of town. They said that 3 cows and a buffalo were said to have died of starvation, and he was sentenced to 6 months house arrest. In this era, there were also numerous complaints of loose animals. Friends say that Thompson loved having something that nobody else had, and he industriously accumulated objects that might fit the bill. He always bragged, said Marshall, that when he sold his business, he had 138 motorcycles, 138 cars, and 138 guns. It was the guns that eventually landed him in real trouble. When the ATF, as his friends pointed out, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. When the ATF raided his home in 2008, they took away 133 firearms and 36 rounds of ammunition. In the end, his friends pointed out, Thompson was only convicted of ownership of a gun without a serial number. He said it was too old to have one. And also the possession of a single machine gun, my father's gun, he said. He told an interviewer of the government. He brought it home from World War II in Germany, never shot it, never been cleaned, never been handled. Thompson said that he only pleaded guilty because otherwise they were going to charge his wife as a co-owner of the property. Thompson told the judge that he pleaded guilty because his wife couldn't afford further legal fees. It was this ATF raid that also forced real scrutiny for the first time on his exotic animals. Most of the animals were kept in connected rows of cages along the driveway leading to his house, and to feed them he would often illegally collect roadkill deer. Toward the end, he seemed to treat his collection of animals the same way he did as everything else. In the later years, it became very overwhelming because Terry went a little off the deep end. He really became a hoarder of the animals, they said. He would have no sense of, okay, this is too many. Terry and his wife owed $50,000 in income taxes and also $12,000 in property taxes. Several zoos had offered to take the exotic animals over the years, but Terry wanted to start a zoo of his own and turned them down. Terry ended up going to prison for 13 months on gun charges. When he was in prison, Mary Ann took care of the animals and one caretaker, but it was too much. When he was released to a halfway house, he was told that Mary Ann no longer wanted to be involved with him. In August, Thompson was moved to a halfway house in Columbus. He was released 40 pounds lighter than the year before. On the day of September 30th, perhaps it was the first of many telltale signs that Thompson, man of so many friends, didn't call anyone. Instead, he walked over to Walmart, bought a Schwinn Cruiser bicycle, and rode nearly 50 miles through the rainy night along the old Route 40 until he reached his home. When he returned on September 30th, he was upset that the animals had been moved around in his cages and he couldn't tell them apart like he used to. He was struggling financially and had received an anonymous letter that Mary Ann was having an affair. Then, when asked about their separation, he told someone, "She can just have it all. I'm going to die." He was asked if he was ill and he replied, "No, but you'll know when I go." He was a broken individual, said Phil Kress, very depressed. It took his heart. The government stole his heart. How he was treated. What did he ever do to his country? His probation officer also visited, and Thompson told him how distraught he was at the prospect of being hooked up to an electronic device for a year. On one of his last visits, one of Terry's friends walked around the animal cages with him. The cats looked healthy enough, apart from one who had ribs showing, and they were rubbing their heads against the fences. That means they're happy, Stillwell says. But Thompson explained how upset he was that he used to be able to go around to his private zoo and call all of his animals by name, but now he could no longer do so. When he came back, they'd been changed around in cages, and he didn't know who was who, which I said earlier. As they passed the lions' cages, Thompson talked about the split. He threw up his arm, said Stillwell, and said, "She can just have it all." And that's when he said, "I'm going to die." "Terry, are you sick?" asked Stillwell. "You got cancer or something?" "No," he replied, "but you'll know when I go." His friends may have been surprised the way that Terry went, but the world would definitely know and how he went. When Mrs. Kopchak made the calls to the 911 operator, knew who she was talking about. Everyone in Zanesville knew who Terry was and his animals. Now, this is where it gets rough. I hate to even go over this, but it needs to be done. But if you don't want to hear about the poor animals, please skip ahead for a while. It's not pretty. When the first deputy arrived, he could see just inside Terry Thompson's fence a tiger, a black bear, and 2 lionesses. When he was waiting for Miss Kopchak to answer the door, he saw a large gray wolf running southward along the road ahead of him, so he followed the wolf. When it turned up towards the house, Mary got his rifle from a trunk and followed on foot. But now the order had come over the radio. put the animals down. It was about 80 yards away from him, but it fell at first shot. After the wolf went down, he was expecting the body when word came over the radio that some colleagues had a lion cornered near the Thompson residence. He hurried back, drove up the hill until he came across the deputy running back and forth near Thompson's driveway. He didn't know what was going on, so he stopped. As he got out the car, he saw a black bear, at first facing him and then running straight towards him. He was facing down 350 pounds of charging bear. He got off one shot. The black bear fell. He said all he remembered was the sight of the bear's head coming up at him, and he also remembered what had been drilled into him in weapons training. Shoot what you see. After that, the deputy went back for his rifle. An African lioness crawled under the livestock fence and ran south down the road, then headed towards someone's home. So he shot her before she could get further. Then he turned back, intending to deal with a black bear and a tiger along the roadway. But he was distracted by a cougar heading south, so he followed the cougar into another driveway where he met a male African lion coming the other way. He shot the lion while some other deputies shot the cougar. Soon he was instructed to patrol the border between the Thompson property and Interstate 70. And over the evening, he shot another wolf, 2 more lions, a tiger, and later on, after found in its hiding place was revealed by a fireman's thermal imaging camera, a grizzly bear. While all this was going on, there was a soccer match just a mile or 2 away. Luckily, no one was hurt. Also, I've seen pictures of signs on the interstate that say something about wild animals on the loose. And I just think how wild that must have been for people driving up the interstate. But nobody knew yet where Terry Thompson was. So there was concern for his safety. As the police neared the farm buildings, they saw more animals. Their cages had either been cut or left open. John Moore, the caretaker who regularly fed the animals, had been alerted by a phone call from someone in the neighborhood. Together, they returned to the house, finding nothing but 2 monkeys and a dog in cages. But on their way back to the road, Moore spotted a body near the barn. A white tiger appeared to be eating it, and then they couldn't get closer. After a while, they headed back towards the body, where the body was, and the white tiger had gone. Nearby, they found bolt cutters and a stainless steel Ruger 357 Magnum revolver. The cause of death seemed to be a gunshot to the head. He had been dragged, says the deputy. You were able to tell that he had laid at one spot for a while and then he was dragged. It looked like by an arm, and his pants and stuff had been pulled down, and he'd been chewed on. There were pieces of raw chicken around Terry as if he wanted to be eaten by his animals. All evening it went on, the killing of the animals. Up near the house, where no media could be seen, the officers laid the dead animals out in rows by species to ease the counting. That's where the famous heartbroken photo was taken. It remains unclear who took it. It had all the bodies lined up in the morning light, and that's the one that went around the world. So I won't be showing that, though. So if you want to see it, you can easily find it online, but I don't want to share that one. Whatever people knew of the real situation and the hard decisions that had to be made, when you see that image, all you could think was, this is a photo of a place where dozens of big, beautiful animals were massacred. It's just awful. I can't even tell you how heartbreakingly sad it is if you haven't seen it. And like I said, I'd recommend you not look it up if you don't want to see it. 49 bears would be confirmed dead. According to a press conference after the event, 1 wolf, 6 black bears, 2 grizzly bears, 9 male lions, 8 lionesses, 1 baboon, 3 mountain lions, and 18 tigers. That was the equivalent of 1% of India's wild tiger population. There was now only 1 animal unaccounted for, a macaque. Though no trace could be found of it, dead or alive, they eventually decided that most likely it had been eaten by one of the cats, but no one knows for sure. 6 of Terry Thompson's animals survived. 3 were leopards still in their cages, 2 more were macaques kept in the living room in the house, and 2 small bird cages. And finally, out near the empty swimming pool was a small grizzly bear, also in a bird cage. The Columbus Zoo were going to take those surviving animals, but by this time Mary Ann had come and was very upset and tried to stop them. But when she saw the bodies of all those who had been killed, she broke down. Mary Ann insisted on removing the macaques from her cages herself, waving off the zoo's personnel's advice that the risk she was taking. She would explain that she had spent $30,000 buying them, and she used to sleep with a young female. While at the zoo, after they moved everybody, while at the zoo, one of the leopards had a gate fall on its head and had to be euthanized. but eventually the 5 other animals were returned to Marion. It was decided that the dead animals be buried there and then on the property. Mrs. Thompson chose the spot. A big digger was brought in and a hole was dug maybe 30 feet deep. The animals were scooped in by the bucket load, placed in a hole, and earth backhoed over them. Thompson's body was taken from the scene for an autopsy. At death, Terry William Thompson was 5 feet 5 inches tall, weighed 174 pounds, had been wearing a black t-shirt, blue jeans, and a white briefs. He was suffering from severe atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, and the only notable substance in his blood was Benadryl. There was a gray powder residue on his left hand that appeared to be from a gun being fired. The wounds mentioned in the autopsy report, aside from the gunshot wound, began with a 2 1/4 inch vertical laceration on the right lower forehead and along the spine of the nose. 21 other injuries, or clusters of injuries, were detailed just on the head and neck alone, the site of the most widespread damage. Others were noted as on his torso and legs, and the coroner described like this: a 5 3/4 times 4 gaping laceration involving the pubic region, bilateral medial thighs, with the absence of genitalia, exposure of the pubic bones, and adjacent soft tissue. So yeah, unfortunately, they went after that first. I guess, soft tissue is the easiest thing to get. After this, the state of Ohio passed Senate Bill 310, regulating the sale and ownership of exotic animals. Alabama, Nevada, North Carolina, South Carolina, and West Virginia, and Wisconsin still have few or no restrictions for exotic ownership. So, a pretty cut and dry case. Terry Thompson let his animals loose, killed himself. The police killed the animals to save the community, and now a bill has been passed so it never happens again. But like most things, nothing is really ever cut and dry, and in many people's minds, many questions remain. I've been in several groups and on several posts about the story, and a lot of people, even living in Zanesville, have their doubts about what happened. That what happened was the way it was presented. Everything up to this point is documented in the official story. Everything after this is mainly just hearsay, but it might make you change your mind about the whole official story. As they say on one of my favorite podcasts, Morbid, this is cuckoo bananas. But Joe Exotic, yep, the Tiger King, he wrote a song called You Can't Believe, and it's about this conspiracy. Not that Joe's the most trustworthy person, but it is very interesting. He says it could be land fracking or illegal guns. And he also made a full-length video about this and has some compelling arguments in it. Terry's death was officially ruled a suicide, but there are many people that were very close to Terry and close to exotic animal business that feel that he would never have committed suicide. There were, after all, a large number of strange occurrences surrounding his death, including many questions about the timeline, the treatment of the animals, and the characters known to be associated with Terry. It's hard to find a lot of information about this, so I'm trying to supply what I can find. One of the other things that is off about this was the timeline. Someone talked to Terry at 3 p.m. that day. They saw him feeding his animals at 3. They know for sure he was alive then. When Terry was found dead, it was 5:20, just a little over 2 hours later. Most people say there's no way he could have made it all over his farm, released all of his animals, made it back to shoot himself by 5:20. He was also found on a trail that he never took. Several people stated that that was weird because it was a trail he didn't use, and why would he kill himself there? It was a horse path his wife sometimes used. Another question people have is why he would use a bolt cutter to set his animals free when he had the keys to all the cages. Some people say this is he did this because so the animals couldn't be recaptured. But others see this as pointing that someone else did it. Cutting the cages with a bolt cutter was a whole lot more work than just setting the animals free. Also, why would he feed his animals ahead of time if he intended to let them loose on society? It just doesn't make sense. Everyone that knew Terry said he loved his animals, and there's no way he would have ever let them free because he knew that the fate that would have awaited him. As I said before, several zoos over the years had offered to buy his animals and he would never sell them. There have been books written about this, one by John Moore called 18 Days to the Massacre. John was Terry's zoo caregiver, and he also believes that foul play was involved. The gun that Terry had used was found 17 feet away. He had shot himself in the head through his mouth. but Terry had a very injured arm, and they said there's no way he could have shot himself the way it was stated. And how could he kill himself and then throw the gun 17 feet? Terry's body had been dragged, they say, which an animal could have done, but his pants were pulled down and unfastened and his belt unfastened, and an animal can't do that. Raw chicken was placed around him. The authorities think that it was to lead his animals to eat him, but once again, how did the chicken get around him if he had been moved? John Moore, Terry's assistant caregiver, says that police shot some of the animals who were safely caged. The police deny this, but he said that they were safe and wouldn't have hurt anyone. Also, from the facts presented in the book, it didn't sound like Terry was very suicidal. He had just bought new clothes that very day and more than one set. He planned to see his wife the next day. He gave John a list of things he wanted done and was planning on breaking horses. His plan that he spoke of involved things he was going to do, like break the horses, and it wasn't an intent to take his life or hurt the animals. He just seemed like he was going to continue living, so, that's kind of something to think about. There were no crime scene photos taken at all. With such a big case with such ramifications, why wouldn't they want to document everything? And this, I feel, is kind of the smoking gun, so to speak. Not to be ironic here. But the gun that Terry used to kill himself had been confiscated by the Muskingum County Sheriff's Department and had currently belonged to a deputy who stated that he sold the gun to Terry. But there's no record of that sale or purchase. Supposedly, the only animals that weren't released, 3 leopards, which according to the animal experts are way more brutal than the other cats, and probably would have attacked right away, which makes people think it wasn't Terry that did that. It was someone else that knew a lot about exotic animals, though. The other 2 animals were macaques, and they sell for a lot of money, so whoever did not release them because they knew the value of them. Terry even said, I don't let my animals run loose. I'm not going to put anyone at risk, including myself and my wife, in danger, or put my animals at risk. I have them because I love them, and I'm willing to do whatever I have to take care of them. I have 7 veterinarians on call at all times. I don't use animals for commerce, so I'm under no regulations like a zoo. But I make sure my animals aren't a threat to the community either. So that doesn't sound much like Terry was in a mindset to ever do something like this. But if it was all set up, what would the motive be for this? Who would have Terry set up, and for what reason? Many believe that there could be a conspiracy around this. Some people think that the sheriff's department could be involved due to them wanting to get rid of Terry and his animals as they were a problem for the county. Others think that organizations like PETA or the Humane Society that wanted to try to stop exotic animal ownership in Ohio. There was a bill in Congress and it had stalled, and this was the catalyst to push it through. Of course, both organizations deny this. Others have said that Terry's land was wanted for fracking for oil wells, and no one could get him to sell it. So was this a way to get rid of him? Of course, no one will know unless someone comes forward. Like I said, most of this is just hearsay and speculation, but there are an awful lot of people online, for sure, who believe that it was not Terry who did this. So what do you guys think? Me, I don't know. We kind of want to make everything into a conspiracy, and sometimes it just isn't. I will say this from my perspective. I'm a huge animal lover. There's no way I could ever do anything like that, knowing the fate of my animals would be facing. And I feel like most animal lovers would feel the same way. But if Terry had a mental illness, we don't know what he was suffering from, and it could have been he felt that this was his only way out. No matter the reasoning behind this, it's an awful, awful situation, and I hope it never happens again. My heart hurts for all of these animals. I couldn't even bear to look at the pictures of them all lined up. It's just so tragic and so sad. But that's the story of the Zanesville Animal Massacre. On a bright note, today is my birthday. So, if you could all do me a favor and give your pets a big old hug for me, and if you have the ability to do it, please, for my birthday, go donate some food or volunteer to walk some animals at your local animal shelter. We can't change the tragedy of Terry's animals, but we can at least help some others. Thanks again for listening. You're all so awesome, and I love your support and enthusiasm of my podcast. This is going so much better than I ever hoped. I just keep sharing and rating and all that stuff. Please spread the word as much as you can so I can keep growing. I really appreciate everything y'all have done so far. Follow me on social media under Poisoned Appalachia. I'm on Facebook, Threads, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and X. And I'm trying to get on LinkedIn, but man, it's kind of confusing. But you can also always email me at poisonedappalachia.gmail.com, or contact me on Facebook. That's really what I use the most, more than anything. But you can contact me wherever. I will get back with you. Thanks. You guys have a great day. Bye.